Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by co-host Matt Carter. And today we're going to talk about what we were able to see at the first day of NC State football's fall camp. It was their first day of practice entering the 2021 season. It was open to the media this morning. The media was able to watch an hour's worth of practice. We were able to get a lot of good looks at early depth charts, saw the players run some drills, able to see what the players looked like, how good a shape they look like coming out of summer strength and conditioning drills, all that good stuff. So we'll break down all of that. Quick reminder for our listeners at home, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere you listen to podcasts. Plus, you can always watch us on our YouTube channel, the Wolfpacker YouTube channel. Please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you're watching us on YouTube. And today actually is a great episode to watch on YouTube because we're going to break down a little bit of film. Now, this is not a conventional chalk talk film, but speaking personally here, Matt, and I don't know, what this was for you. This might be my first question for you, Matt. But my biggest takeaway from today's first day of fall camp actually came towards the tail end of the open practice session this morning. We were watching a few throwing drills with the quarterbacks, and one of the last throws before the media was asked to leave the field and NC State went into its second half of the first session here this morning. Devin Leary threw an incomplete pass to Thayer Thomas, who slipped in the end zone. I was recording it on video, and the ball was coming in hot, and it accidentally hit me in the groin, and it hurt really, really bad. And I put the video up on Twitter. If you want to give that a look, it's at Justin H. Will is my Twitter handle. You can go watch the video for yourself. But, that caused me a great deal of pain this morning. I was able to recover, was able to continue my day of work, Matt, go on to the press conferences about 45 minutes later, upload the videos, all that good stuff, and, able to make some Twitter content out of it. But before we break down the film, we're going to be able to break it down here on YouTube. So go over to our YouTube channel and watch this episode if you wish. But Matt, was that one of the big takeaways for you today? Was the nut shot?
It was fucking hilarious.
Was it more hilarious when I asked Dylan Ottenreith last year a question that was intended for Dylan Parham?
That was more like Meet the Parents hilarious. That painful cringe.
Right.
Yeah. Now this is more like that one guy put on Twitter, go ahead and give him the $10,000. America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yeah, this is slapstick, like Three Stooges. Without further ado, let's go ahead and bring up the film here. We've got our great eCam platform here that we do our podcast with. So this is our first look at a chalk talk. Maybe we'll do some more real chalk talk as we get into the season. But here's the video for those watching on YouTube. We've got it at the bottom of the screen here. So I'm going to freeze the frame. All right, let's just take it from the top, a slow-mo view. We'll watch it in real time first, and then we'll do a slow view, and then we'll get into the fall camp. So, if you don't care about this, just skip ahead, and we'll talk about some NC State football. But let's go through this. One time through, Leary snaps back to pass. Thayer slips. Derek Pitt's playing great coverage on him. The ball bounces just beyond the out-of-bounds marker in the end zone, bounces right up. And I'm trying to walk it off. I mean, what can you do other than collapse to the floor? It wasn't the proper setting for that. I mean, but we were talking about this, Matt. We've talked about this a great deal this afternoon. And, Leary is the gunman.
Right there is where you can see Thayer is trying to cut out.
Right.
And that left foot, he doesn't get a good plant on. He's on the outside of the foot. Now, this is when Devin has already thrown the ball. Luke DeCock, appropriately, didn't
All right. That got me, Matt.
He did not walk around the camera. He walks in front of the camera. And so that it kind of converges all at once. So you see Leary's about to throw the pass. The pass is up. Now, your view has been obstructed. You cannot really see the football here.
Oh, this is complete interference by
They
Luke
are
DeCock.
completely slipped. And I think even Derek, doing what a good corner does, you're kind of holding him down a little bit to make sure he can't get back up. So that completely eliminates any chance of catching the pass. At this point, you're just getting your viewpoint of the football again. So it's probably too late for you to thoroughly react. And quite frankly, you're doing your job, which is important. That's your first priority, not your health.
Well, to set the scene, I've got a video camera in my hands, right? So my perspective is based on the small screen on the camcorder. I'm not looking out on the actual field. I'm looking at the camcorder recording the action. And you see Thayer Thomas's, I mean, he's completely horizontal. There's no way he's getting this ball at this point. Derek Pitts has won himself this rep. And Luke DeCock's looking back like, I'm getting out of here. He's not protecting his namesake. And then right here was, and if
you can't see the ball either. So the ball bounced, and see, this is what you're looking at. So people at home know that's what you're looking at. That's with point of impact. And if you had sound on it, those were my black shoes you saw a second ago.
Yep, me confirming.
I did help out. I went and got the football for the football team and gave it back to them.
Wow.
So for those who were wondering if I was helping, I did help.
Yeah, wow. Thanks, Matt. You went and helped out the football guys, not your colleague that you should have been worried about. You know, that was my.
I was worried about you. It was just hard to suppress the laughter. But I'm glad you're okay.
I'm okay. We're on ice. Plenty of the ice machine at my place is working. So yeah, I'm okay. For the listeners at home, don't worry about me. If you do, want to send donations, feel free to DM me on Twitter. We can arrange for that to happen. But let's move on to some actual football. This is not a comedy podcast. And for those that aren't amused by this, we apologize. So let's get into some real chalk talk, Matt. Other than the nut shot, what was your number one takeaway from what you're able to see today in today's first day of fall camp?
Yeah, I've been doing. I think it's probably the first team I covered was the 2004 NC State team. First time I went to a practice was probably that spring. First time to a fall camp, 2005. And there's some years where you see them at camp and you're like, this is a good-looking group. And I remember the first time I really felt that way was 2010. It happened to be Russell Wilson's last year. That team took charge of practice. It was like the coaches didn't have to tell them where to go, what to do. They were just coaching them up on technique and fundamentals. They looked the part. Those 2017 team and 2018 team looked like that. This, particularly 2017 team, it was interesting. This team, it looked like they were in that mold. It really wasn't a position group where you could point to and say they don't look the part. There wasn't a position group. You felt like there was a lot of teaching going on. You saw a lot of coaches working with players, not coaching up players. They knew where they were going and what they were doing, and the ones that were looking like they were making mistakes were the ones you were hoping that were making mistakes. The freshmen, the young players that were just showed up. It was just it looks impressive. Now the caveat on this, as we said a million times, and Dave Dorn, touched on this in his post-game availability, which you can see on the site or also on our YouTube channel. It's probably the way a lot of teams are going to feel this year because of the super senior element of the equation where seniors were allowed to come back for another year, where eligibility was frozen. When they did it, made all the sense in the world. In hindsight, was probably an unnecessary move. But it was, even in hindsight, it's still the right move, even if it was unnecessary, because it gave players an outlet to. I think in hindsight, the best move would have said you could use what's called a COVID red shirt and add a year of eligibility. if you wanted it. But otherwise, if you play, your clock keeps ticking. So, but because of that, I think there's a lot of teams that are going to feel like that. But I will tell you, I've seen this a lot, and this team looks in excellent shape. They look deep. They look healthy. They got a lot of numbers. They got a lot of experience, and it shows up. Now, no pads, within just the basics of basics. So we don't get a whole lot. All we can tell is who looks like they're competing for a spot and what kind of shape they look like they're in. On the ladder, it looked excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with basically everything you said, Matt. This open practice is not something that's going to change anybody's mind in terms of a win-loss record prediction. It's not going to predict what the stat totals for Devin Leary or Zonovan Knight are going to look like this fall. We're just going to have to see how the action unfolds a month from now before we're able to have those answers. But what this was able to show us was really more of a confirmation on some of the off-season topics in terms of there is a lot of energy in that locker room. The energy was strong, I thought. I thought everybody that I was able to see firsthand looked dialed in, locked in. There were no moments where typically when you go to a college football practice, there will be at least one coach blowing up at a player because they weren't hustling hard enough or they made a boneheaded mistake or something like that. There was no such instance of that, at least what I was able to see, of anybody exploding on a player or getting on a player, because there wasn't really anything specific to get on anybody about. I thought everybody looked sharp. It was crisp. The quarterbacks looked good. The running backs looked good. There weren't a lot of drop balls, and what balls weren't completed in some of those drills. I thought the defensive backs looked really sharp, guarding some of the receivers one-on-one. I mean, there were some intense battles, even for, a type of venue where they're not going to roll out a whole lot while all the media is there and all the cameras are there. It's going to be the bare bones basics, and, essentially it's just a quick firsthand look at the team before you get to see the real action a month from now. But, I would say I was impressed. From what I was able to see. I don't think we learned a whole lot from the availabilities afterwards. Head coach Dave Dorn talked for about 10 minutes or so, about an hour after practice, and Devin Leary, Thayer Thomas, Isaiah Moore, and Ikem Ekwonu were also the players that were made available after the practice. Devin Leary was at ACC kickoff, as was Dave Dorn. I thought a lot of the questions and answers were pretty similar to what we were able to take in at ACC kickoff in Charlotte. And, no surprising answers from Thayer Thomas, Ikem Ekwonu, or Isaiah Moore. So, I think these guys are just dialed in. I think there's a consensus belief within the locker room that this team can achieve something special. That was brought up by pretty much everybody that talked after practice today, that this team has very high expectations, and it's not content with another 8-4 season. I know. We had Joe Giglio on the podcast a couple months ago for his Russell Wilson podcast. We were talking to him a little bit about that, but at the end of that show, we all had a record prediction of 8-4 for NC State. And I don't think any of us were coming in at 8-4 with the angle of this is going to be a disappointing season. It was, this team is going to be an improved product from 2019. The schedule's just a lot tougher. But these guys, I don't think they're content with 8-4. They want double-digit wins. They want to go win an ACC championship, and that's right where the program should be, considering where the roster is at right now. If you're going to make the case that NC State's going to have a special type double-digit win season, based on what you're able to see today, and based on everything that we've known and covered over the past several months here during the off season, entering the fall camp. What would be your biggest argument in favor of that being the outcome this fall? Is it just the collective depth and the fact that, you got about 50 guys that are ready for a game and could contribute positively in a game, and that has not always been the case?
Yeah, depth is a big part of it. It allows you, look, for a school like NC State, really, and this isn't, I say like NC State. When I say like NC State, I'm talking about anybody outside the top 10. or top 5 needs good luck with health. It needs everybody going to get injuries. Everybody going to get hit hard by injuries. But once you get past Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, once you get past those 4 or 5 schools, those schools are much more well built to withstand injuries unless it gets really catastrophic, particularly at certain positions. Once you get past those groups, a lot of what you see in the top 25 are the teams that have had good luck with health and the right guys staying healthy and the depth to overcome what injuries they did have. I think with this NC State team, they are in a position to withstand injuries much better and be more competitive if they have injuries. If they don't have injuries, then they're really well set up. But it never has happened, never will happen. And there's certainly some injuries that would sting a lot worse. Yeah, I think Devin Leary, for instance, healthy is paramount. But if you were to lose a Bam Knight or an Ike Ekwonu or a Peyton Wilson, of course, that's going to sting more. But you have guys that can pick up the load and give you positive contributions. So I do think that depth. Now, again, for the 900th time that I think we've said this on the podcast, that caveat being I'm sure a lot of other teams feel that way. But if this NC State team can stay healthy, and the key guys in particular, it has a strong collection of all ACC candidates, which is a good measuring stick of how talented your team is. This NC State team has a strong collection of all ACC candidates. I know only, I think, 3 made the preseason All-ACC team.
That's correct.
But I can make a case for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more off the top of my head right there. I'm.
Well, I had 8. I had 8 on my ballot, so
Yeah.
because there's a case for at least 8.
Yeah, once you get up past 5 All-ACC guys, first team All-ACC. We're talking first team All-ACC. Once you get up past 5 first team All-ACC caliber guys, you have a pretty good roster. And so, tricky part is it's just been the schedule. It's just, you look at the game that you say, okay, which game based on paper a team's going to say, people are going to say those are the toughest. I would say there are 3. And 2 of them are in Raleigh. So that's good that you're getting them in Raleigh. But the counter to that is, are your more toss-up games? When you look at them, okay, you say, which games are the toss-up? And you run down through the list, you're running into a heck of a lot of road games. Pretty much every single road game this year is a toss-up. And you don't like the fact that you have 5 of your probably 6 toss-ups on the road. And that's just the main hesitancy. If they can prove to be good road warriors, which maybe they followed a cue from the baseball team. They were pretty good on the road last year. Beat Pittsburgh, beat Virginia on the road last year. So won at Syracuse. So they won some road games last year. That's going to be the key. To answer your question, what can make it a magical season? Good health and road warrior mentality.
Well, they will have to win on the road. As you mentioned, a lot of those toss-up games will be away from Carter-Finley Stadium. But when you look up and down this roster, I mean, there's really not, and you were getting to this in your point, Matt, there's not really one position group where you're like, well, if they lose one guy there, they're in real big trouble. I mean, the only one that comes to mind is quarterback. And we don't really know.
We don't know what Ben Finley could, it's clear from practice today, Ben Finley is number 2.
Right.
And it's a very limited sample size. That's not an indictment on Ben Finley. It's just a element of unknown.
But it's also not out of the question that, if he had to come into a game and if he had to replace a Devin Leary for whatever reason at any point during the season, that he couldn't be, just as good, if not better, than a Bailey Hockman was last year. I mean, that's not out of the question. I think that would just be the number one area of the last guy you want to lose to health on this team is Devin Leary. But other than that, I mean, you look at the receivers, And I'm not saying you would ever wish that your starting lineup of receivers was hurt. But even if it was, I mean, they were talking about there's 15 guys of, probably 21 guys in that position group room that are capable of positively contributing to a game right now. That second team wide receiver room is still really solid. You could still go win games with that group. Same thing with the running backs. You've got 4 really solid options in the running back room. And even on defense, I mean, how different is the situation from just 1 year ago in the defensive back room? You've got a whole cupboards full of cornerbacks who are, it's not a situation of there's a competition battle because you're trying to figure out, who your less weak pieces are. It's really a strength on strength battle. You've got 6 really viable options at corner. The safety group looks strong. The reserves look healthy. Defensive line, I mean, you look at the 2 deep there, you could flip-flop the 2 deep and you could still make a case that the second team could be a viable first-team defensive line group in the ACC. The linebacker group we always have known to be deep and very talented. So, yeah, I mean, it's just 50 guys, I'd say. And that's at least in the past decade of Wolfpack football, I can't remember a team that is as deep as this. I understand the conversation exists out there that there's a lot of teams out there that have a lot of returning talent. I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure everybody feels good at this time of the year. But, NC State specifically has a lot of guys that have proven track records on the field. There might be other teams that feel good about their depth right now, but I doubt there's as many teams that have, that can look up and down their roster and say there's 30, 35 guys here that have past starts in a college football game. And there's a lot to say about that going through a 12-game schedule, particularly when you're transitioning from a year where not everybody played 12 games. A lot of people had shortened seasons, and the exhaustion that happened last year. You're going to need a team that has some stamina about it to get through, a full regular season, the first one in 2 years now. So did anything else stand out to you at fall camp, Matt? I mean, I don't know if we need to break down specific drills or anything here. It was just good to get out there and good to see the guys.
Yeah. It looked like, they continue to cross-train Jordan Houston and Trent Penix at various positions. So that was something that caught my eye. I saw Jordan Houston cutting passes on the goal line in that infamous drill that we've already seen.
Can confirm Devin Leary's throwing velocity is fine. If we're worried about that right leg being able to plant into the ground and him having some zip on his balls, no pun intended. Take it from a first-hand account. That velocity is sharp.
Yeah. We should mention the position battles that we've been talking about a lot.
Yeah.
Offensive line, that's still got to play out. But right now, as of day 1, hour 1 of the first day of camp, it looked like Bryson Spees at right tackle and Derek Eason at right guard. But we know that they have high expectations for Chandler Zavala. They just haven't seen him in pads yet, and that's to come. And they see what he does in the weight room and what he did at the Fairmont State level will translate. Right now, he kind of looked like he was on the second line at left guard.
Not to cut you off on Chandler Zavala, but he was at left guard with the second team and some of the reps that I saw. And, man, did he stick out like a sore thumb on that second unit because he looked like clearly the biggest guy. It's like, you get some younger-looking offensive linemen. They're all big guys, obviously, but, you can tell there's a difference between a 280 guy or 290 guy and a 320 guy. And Chandler Zavala just looks like a grown-ass man with that second team there. I mean, it was pretty funny to see that.
Yeah, and we'll see how that plays out. The secondary is obviously that right side of that offensive line is the number 1 position battle on offense, and then the secondary is the number 1 position battle on defense. And no changes from what we saw at the end of spring. It was still Derek Pitts, the transfer from Marshall, that corner opposite of Shaheem Battle. But I thought it was interesting that it looked like Chris Ingram, who was a starter and a really good starter before he hurt his knee midway through the 2019 season. He was unable to get cleared until this camp right now. Like, he didn't even participate in spring, if I recall. So he's been out a long time. But he was working kind of shadowing battle out there doing drills, which was interesting. But they also had Tayshawn Smith and Aiden White with the second string corners. And Cecil Powell was not practicing today. He was out there, but he was not practicing. So, he'll probably get in the mix once he gets back. And Jakeen Harris was still at strong safety, where he started and took more snaps than anybody last year. But obviously, they're very intrigued by Cyrus Fagan, transfer from Florida State.
Although one observation about the strong safety, Dave Dorn did specifically mention strong safety as one position group competition that he was looking at 2 weeks ago during ACC kickoff. Today, he didn't mention strong safety. He mentioned corners, and that was it for the secondary. So maybe a potential hint that Jakeen Harris is kind of, maybe has a lead there for that first team rep, because he did play more snaps than anybody else on the team last year.
Yeah. So then, we'll see how that obviously plays out. And then, there's some smaller position battles too. Like, who was going to be that at the linebacker, for instance? We know that Levi Jones is the top number 4 linebacker. And we presume that Jalen Scott, who started the bowl game when a couple of those linebackers were hurt, would be on it. Who would be the last guy on the second string? I know a lot of people were excited about Jordan Poole and Caden Fordham in the spring game, but it was actually what I call the second-year freshman, since they're not technically redshirt freshmen, Devon Betty, who's running second string. And don't rule out Seth Williams, a former walk-on, who might also get in the mix. So that's kind of how that was breaking down. And to see, it was interesting when they did shotgun snap drills. It was Dylan McMahon with the second center in the line after Grant Gibson. So might give an indication if something happened to Gibson. McMahon, who was recruited as a center, might move inside to take some snaps. So there's a lot of little interesting things like that you see in the first practice. That's probably where you gain most of your information from people who want to know about the team. That's probably, I think, where you gain most of your information. And Emeka Emezie, I don't think was out there for the first half of practice. Apparently showed up in the second half. But, it was interesting that Porter Rook kind of slid into that first string, and Thayer Thomas moved outside, and then the second string was, I think, Anthony Smith and C.J. Riley, who got singled out after practice for having a great practice. So,
and Julian Gray.
Who I thought looked really good.
True freshman.
Early
He's looked great every time we've seen him in person.
Yeah.
He's going to make a play this year. I'm just going to say that right now. He's going to make at least one great play. You got to love what you see from that true freshman. Quick question, Matt. Do you recall if McMahon replaced Grant Gibson in the bowl game when Grant Gibson
went out? I believe he did.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he
okay.
Did. I know Derek Eason came in, so he did. Yeah, they spread over. Eason played the guard spot. So,
and then Dorn also circled the defensive line as that third position group battle that he's looking at. Not necessarily in terms of it is also in terms of who's going to be winning the starting roles. But he did mention that obviously defensive line is a position group that rotates in and out. So just because you're not on the first string doesn't mean that you're going to be not playing significant minutes. But today we saw C.J. Clark at nose and Daniel Joseph and Savion Jackson at defensive end. Did you notice Terrell Dawkins out there? Was he on second?
I didn't see Terrell Dawkins. The second line was Ibrahim Conte, Davin Van, and the Florida State transfer Corey Durden.
Yep.
Obviously, Dawkins will figure into the mix when he gets back. I thought Joshua Harris looked in excellent shape relative to where he was previously. He might get in the mix at nose tackle. And I still think that another freshman that looks good is Travali Price at defensive end. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays out. So, but yeah, Dave Dorn's right. I mean, Aleem McNeil got so much credit last year, and deservedly so. All-American, doing well with the Detroit Lions. But go look at the snap counts last year. There was not a big difference between Aleem McNeil and C.J. Clark. in some games. So just goes to show you that the defensive line does rotate, as you mentioned. I mean, so finding that second line is paramount because those guys will play almost starter-like reps on defense.
And NC State is a program that has, built a reputation on developing NFL caliber talent at the defensive line position. I'm not saying that this group is going to stack up against, 2017, a guy, a team that had multiple NFL draft picks on it at defensive line. However, it is kind of the first time since that season that you kind of get the sense that, defensive line could be a strength of this defense for NC State. It's kind of the first time maybe since that year, because I know 2019 had good players like James Smith-Williams and Laurel Murchison. Laurel Murchison obviously had a great season that ended up getting him draft stock and getting him drafted to the Titans. But James Smith-Williams missed a majority of that season due to injury, so you weren't really able to see the results on the field. Yes, you lose Aleem McNeil, a pro caliber guy that's now with the Detroit Lions, but other than that, you get everybody back, and plus you've gotten stronger with a transfer like a Corey Durden. So I think you should be really encouraged if you're an NC State fan based on what we were able to see on the first day of fall camp. We're going to have more availabilities here pretty regularly throughout the next 2 weeks with players, and we'll get Dave Doran and the coordinators next week. We'll get Doran again for the third time in the past month at that point, and the coordinators for the first time in a while. We were able to interview the coordinators for the Football Preview magazine, which if you don't have a copy, Wolfpack Club members, you should already have a copy. But if you want a copy of the Football Preview magazine, head over to the wolfpackeronline.com and order a copy today. We did have interviews with both the coordinators and Dave Doran, several other great breakdowns in that magazine. But, Matt, I think that
we could note all those interviews ran online, so if you have a premium subscription, you would have seen the full interview of all of them.
Yeah.
Online as well.
Thank you for that, Matt. And use promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial to unlock those interviews. You can read the full transcripts of the Q&A. So no angles from us journalists, just straight up Q&A, just like you want it, meat and potatoes. Well, that's going to do it for this podcast episode. Quick reminder for listeners at home, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google. Plus, you can watch this on YouTube, which I highly recommend. If you did skip forward through our chalk talk over my unfortunate injury this morning, I do recommend you watch on YouTube. It's funny. It's funny. What can you do when you're in that position? You just gotta have a good sense of humor. So subscribe on YouTube, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow our main account at the Wolfpacker. You can follow me personally at Justin H. Will, and give us a like on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack, on thewolfpacker.com. So for Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.